It's time to review Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 248. And this is a pretty dense chapter, a lot happens here, there's a lot of dialogue, so let's dive right into it. And this one started off right where we left off 3 weeks ago with the Executioner's Sword headed straight for Sukuna. And in this opening, we see that the Executioner's Sword shrinks down because the technique is dissipating due to Higuruma's death. And I want to make it clear that it's just my interpretation of this. The paneling makes it look like Sukuna is still on the same side with Higuruma's body. Some people think Sukuna dodged, and some people think the Executioner's Sword just dinked off of him in general, but really, at the end of the day, the takeaway here is that the Executioner's Sword failed to kill him. But with the Executioner's Sword gone, Sukuna immediately turns around and decks Yuji. Yuji is sent tumbling, and Sukuna gives him no time to rest, sending out 2 additional slashes. And while Yuji is busy eating all of that, Sukuna starts to realize that the Kamutoke has not returned after Higuruma's death. So it seems like the Kamutoke is just gone forever, and now this is the part where I'm seriously thinking this was just a get out of jail free card. I don't really have an issue with the Kamutoke being taken instead of his CT. My issue comes from where he got the cursed tool. Yorzu dies, and making him this tool, he uses it one time against Kashimo to no effect and then fries some crows. And then it gets vaporized from reality, and he gets to keep his curse technique, which it looks like the curse technique loss would have been permanent if he killed Higuruma. And that entire string of events hits my personal threshold for convenience in a story. But regardless of that, we get to see Ui grave robbing the battlefield. He and Kriara take away Higuruma's body, and Sukuna notes that he must have an instant teleportation technique. And the ability to instant teleport yourself and other people, that is a cracked ability. Ui just needs to martyr himself and teleport Sukuna into the sun. And if there's a distance limit, I don't know, make a trap or something, Gojo's body vanished this way as well, and Sukuna didn't even know how. Because Ui is just that sneaky on the battlefield. And Sukuna wonders if Ui is taking the wounded to be healed by Shoko. But he rules that out because he thinks her RCT is not capable of healing Gojo, as RCT is half as effective on somebody else, and even though her RCT is fundamentally different from Gojo and Sukuna's in ways we don't know, it's still less effective. And somebody brought the idea to my attention that Udahime and Gakuganji are having a dance, guitar, and necromancy ritual to buff Shoko's healing and bring Gojo back to life. And the idea of a necromancy song and dance in a basement to bring back Gojo sounds pretty funny, so honestly, I'm here for it. But what Sukuna was trying to figure out here is if Yuji got sent to Shoko to heal his stomach or he learned RCT in 1 month. And we get the reveal that Yuji has in fact obtained RCT in 1 month. And while this isn't as much of a power-up as it used to be, because right now, not having RCT pretty much just means you're dead on arrival, Sukuna still thinks that the overall improvements of all the characters are still impressive. But this is where we get into what is probably the most important character moment of the chapter, where Sukuna starts to space out and has an internal monologue. And he begins to repeat to himself the same things he said to Kashimo, that eating people is just the way to pass the time until he dies. And that is all people have ever meant to him. And you see him starting to struggle with this. You see it on his face that he is starting to realize that there might be more to life than just hedonism. And he even goes as far back as thinking about Jogo's death and how Jogo didn't have the hunger to seize his ideals. And Sukuna goes back to his own words that he lives the life he wants, and if you can't measure up, you need to blame yourself. Because for Sukuna, he is inherently selfish. All things must be internal and go back to you. And that's why in this chapter he says, I'd never thought about ideals that go beyond oneself. And he realizes the people that are confronting him today, their ideals are all selfless. They are all martyrs for a greater cause. And while this is not the first time he has encountered people who are martyring themselves against him, this is the first time it bothers him because the one who has changed is him. And the crux of that, in his own words, is Yuji Itadori as an undeniable reality that somebody can have an indomitable will that can rival him. And even though Yuji is undeniably weaker than Sukuna, Sukuna realizes that he has that hunger and that overwhelming sense of self that he has been telling people to obtain, but he obtained it through selflessness and maintaining an ideal rather than selfishness and hedonism. And that is what fundamentally pisses off Sukuna here to no end, because Yuji is living proof that Sukuna's ideology is wrong. And you can obtain the drive for power and reach the heights of power without having a complete disregard for others. And that's why he then goes on to say, just this once, I'm going to take your ideals and mince them to bits. Because Yuji is the only person on Earth that Sukuna thinks he has to prove wrong. Sukuna creates a light over his head, and Kusakabe freaks out, wondering what this is, as a new rule is added to the Culling Games. That Megumi Fushiguro has the authority to start the merger with Tengen. And Kusakabe then says what I've been thinking, which is Sukuna Sukuna is really bad, but he's not a Jujutsu terrorist that wants to end the world. And he always thought he wouldn't start the merger or do something like this, but it turns out we're both wrong and Sukuna really is that crazy. Sukuna then says, I'm going to start by killing all of you, and then I'll kill the rest of the Culling Games players, and then I'm going to go fight the new Tengen. So Sukuna is saying he is going to fight the greatest cursed spirit to ever live for fun. How strong is this guy? We're probably about to find out, because Yuta Okkotsu shows up and says, sorry I'm late guys. And we get the first confrontation of Yuta and Sukuna as Sukuna reinforces his fingers and clashes with Yuta's katana. And Sukuna tells Yuta to put up a good fight or everyone's gonna die. Only for Rika to pop out and say, who the hell do you think you're talking to, as Sukuna greets the queen and the chapter ends. I know a lot of people think Yuta is going to get bodied, and yeah, he's probably far weaker than Sukuna still, but Yuta has had a month of training, everyone else improved, I don't see why he wouldn't have. He's a lot stronger now, and he's not exactly fighting alone. And the little hype text at the end of the chapter says, the king versus the queen, who will take the throne will be determined here. And a crazy prediction here, it's not going to be Rika. But Yuta, on the other hand, Yuta is pretty goated, and even though he hasn't been an MC for a long ass time, and he's hardly even in this series, he is the only one here with a katana, and katanas are pretty good in anime. And as far as Kenjaku is concerned, I think he's just dead. I've thought that for a while, and now with Yuta showing up, I definitely think he's dead. Leaving Kenjaku alive seems monumentally stupid. A lot of people think that all of his cursed spirits would get released, but you have to remember that these cursed spirits were Ghettos, and they didn't go away when he died. They didn't all escape and get unleashed on the world, they pretty much just went dormant in his body. And that seems to be the case here, and the one who added this Culling Game rule, it might have been Kenjaku himself. We didn't see Sukuna pull up Kogain and add another rule. I'm guessing this is just Kenjaku's contingency, and that's what the characters say as well. And if this is how Kenjaku dies, I don't really have a problem with it. I never really thought he was a villain that was going to make it to the end of JJK. He definitely set up a lot for the plot, but as a character, there's just not a whole lot for him to do anymore, especially now that Sukuna can start the merger. And maybe he'll come back to life and have some crazy plan, but JJK really isn't filled with that many crazy plot twists. But if there is a crazy plot twist, it would happen towards the end of the story, and really right now, the ending of Jujutsu Kaisen and the complexity of the ending, it hinges on some major payoff to a couple plot points. Those being Sukuna's last finger, what is the true purpose of the Culling Games, and what was Tengen hiding? I would put those as the three biggest question marks we still have left in JJK. And those are the parts of the story that make me think the ending is going to have a major plot twist, because right now, I just don't see them beating Sukuna. Maki and Akari are probably going to show up and fight Sukuna with Yuta at some point here, but he still has a hidden technique, and really, he's not worried at all about any of this. This feels less like the final fight with Sukuna, and more like we're just in the prelude to a backstory reveal. And on a side note, I think it's kind of interesting that Sukuna, the more we see of him, the more we see of his personality, he is kind of a dork. And it's more interesting when we see that pure evil is not where he started. Gege Akutami once said that a prominent character is going to get eaten by Sukuna, and it's probably going to happen in this fight. And Yuta, Hikari, and Maki have all finished their character arcs pretty much, and they have nothing left to do in JJK except fight people. And meanwhile, Yuji is the arch nemesis of Sukuna, and they both have unfinished character arcs, and it just doesn't bode well for Maki, Hikari, or Yuta. But regardless, they are the heavy hitters, and they're going to get a fight with him because that's already been set up as far back as chapter 222. And win or lose, I hope the fight's good because it's probably going to be the last fight we see these three characters in. And if they do manage to pull out a W, please save Megumi. I know some people think he's dead, even though 0 characters in the story have treated him as dead. But at this rate, Megumi coming back and taking over his body again might be their only hope. But those are some of my opinions on this chapter and JJK as a whole. I know a lot of people are saying that JJK is being rushed right now, and I kind of agree, especially with the 1 month time skip. But I still enjoy the overall story, even if the pacing has picked up quite a bit, and it may be a little slow down, especially with these constant break weeks because we are on break again. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below if you think JJK's pacing is getting too fast, and if you like content like this, subscribe for more. And as always, thanks for watching.